that all right? Good morning, everyone. We'd like to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the State Board of Medical Licensure. I'm Michelle Owens, a maternal fetal medicine specialist and president of the board. So at this time, we'd like to stand. I'd like to have everyone stand, and we will have our invocation, which will be by Dr. Dodson, and our pledge by Dr. Kennard.
Will you bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we come this morning with the praise of thanksgiving on our lips and a petition in our hearts. We pray for a spirit of discernment so that the words we speak here today will be pleasing to you, and that the decisions we make will be fair, just, and centered in love, and our love for you, the state of Mississippi, and the practice of medicine, and for all those who present before this body. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, please stand for the attention to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, I'd like to announce a few of our special guests. We have Lori Busick, who's our court reporter. And we are also very fortunate to have Representative Lee Yancey joining us today. Thank you so much. It's always nice to see members of the legislature to come over here and play around and see what we're doing over here in the State Board of Medical Licensure. So glad to have you. Thank you so much for being here. This is the point where we open up the floor for announcements and public comments. We do have one person who submitted to participate today, Miss Julie Pace. Is she here? All right. All right, well, okay, if that's the case, we will go ahead and move on with our agenda. So next, we will hear from our executive directors. So she's not a special guest. She's with us all the time. There's a family here. Oh, sorry, and Miss Alexis Morris, who's representing the Attorney General's office. She's always with us, so she's family to us anyway. So now we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you. Thank you. In licensure for September and October, we issued 104 new licenses, MD and DO, 1 new podiatry, and 20 new physician assistants. In addition to those, what we consider normal licenses, we issued 168 compact licenses and issued 23 letters of qualifications for people to join the IMLC. Certifications issued to other states was 429. In investigations, we received an additional 90 complaints. We were able to close 23 cases. We had to open 26 new cases, giving us a total of 81 cases open. Cases that we were able to close within 7 days was down from 85% last report to 74%. Some of that is we are putting in a new system where it's not just Ken that makes all the decisions, but we have a that, and we were having to do it manually. It's actually been integrated into our computer system now, so it should pick back up so that we're not delayed. We requested 94 PMP reports. 70 of those required additional investigation. Oops. And I will continue to make my plea with committee chairs to set a normal time between board meetings for your committee to have a meeting, or at least to have the discussion with me if there's business before your committee that we need to discuss and have that committee meeting. And so we have become more active in the licenses, education and communication. We had a committee meeting with that, and we have a reason to have another meeting with that coming up here soon. So hopefully we'll get that meeting scheduled. And then of course, rules and regs always stays busy. I would also announce that yesterday in the full meeting of the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission meeting, that I was reelected another year to be the treasurer for the compact. So I will continue those duties for one more year. And so I'm actually looking forward to that, believe it or not. Now, with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
I would like to offer our congratulations again to Dr. Cleveland. It is always good to see our leadership being represented on the national stage, you know, in regulation. And we just appreciate your representation on all those levels. So you're doing a great job as our executive director, but we also appreciate you being willing to step back and do some things, take your talents nationally as well.
Thank you.
I second that, Madam President. And with the legislature in our audience, that it's important that that people know that we're upholding all of the obligations that we know we have as a board, but the national leadership is paying attention, and Mississippi is led in several different areas. From a federation standpoint, they have looked at Mississippi's operations and implemented a lot of the same things. So under Dr. Cleveland's leadership, you know, having a position like that kind of maintains his ability to kind of have that insight that we need to make the best decisions and continue leading. So that is important.
Thank you.
I will also just echo to the committee chairs. I know everyone's really busy, but giving you the latitude to be able to schedule your meetings based upon your the balance of clinical responsibilities and other things that you have going on is an act of goodwill on behalf of the leadership. And so if you don't take advantage of it, then we might have to assign you a meeting time. So we would encourage you to make a choice while there still is one. So that'll make it a lot easier. Any other questions for the executive director and his report? He did give us an overview of his activities this morning in the executive committee meeting. And he's really pounding the pavement and doing a lot of work on behalf of the board and even in service to our licensees. So just want y'all to have that update too.
Thank you.
All right, moving on with the agenda, we now have approval of minutes. So in tab 5 in your binder are the minutes rather from the executive committee meeting of September 13th. I think all of these have been provided to you in advance, but for those of you who might not have had a chance to peruse them, if you'll take this moment and look over them briefly and see if there are any corrections or additions, and if none, I'm willing to entertain a motion for approval.
Make that motion for those minutes.
Is there a second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Those minutes stand approved as submitted. We'll move on to tab 6, which includes the minutes of the board meeting from September 13th and 14th. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
I second.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Rob, we really appreciate you chiming in.
Wish I were there in person, so.
That's all right. It's important your vote's gonna be counted, buddy. That's it. All right. And next, tab 7. Which is the approval of the minutes for our specialty Zoom meeting that was held on September 26th. Any additions or corrections? It was a pretty quick meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion, okay.
All right. And a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Who was the second?
Kennard, Dotson made, Kennard seconded. All right. And finally, tab 8, which doesn't exist, is because tab 8 is sitting right next to me. Dr. Joyner will give you the report from this morning's executive committee meeting.
So the executive committee met this morning to consider 4 cases. We approved the request in 3 of the cases, and on the 4th I recused myself, so. Did you approve?
We ended up approving that one as well.
So all 4 cases were approved.
So there was one that was denied. So if I remember correctly,
Approved with restrictions. I think.
we approved with restrictions. So, and then the first one, so the appearance of Brian Pendleton, that one was denied. And the reason behind that was Mr. Pendleton's request was actually a request that was prohibited by statute.
Oh, yeah.
And so as a result of that being a statutory requirement deemed to be outside the jurisdiction of this body. And so as a result of that, we denied that request. So the first appearance by Mr. Pendleton was denied. The remaining appearances by Drs. Burt, Sweet, and Vassar were all approved with Dr. Vassar's request being approved with certain restrictions.
I stand corrected.
No problem. We help each other.
How quickly we forget, right?
And that's
Literally, that happened this morning. So hearing that report from the executive committee, the 1 denial and 3 waiver requests that were granted, is there a motion to accept the report of the executive committee or the recommendation?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any further discussion on those items?
That's all we're told to say.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, thank you so much. We will move on to reports from our committees. So we'll go in the order that they're listed. Dr. Kennard and scope of practice.
No report.
Professionals Health Program, Dr. Lippincott.
Thanks. I would just like to say that the Mississippi Physicians Health Program is one of the oldest and most respected physicians health programs in the country. It was established in 1978 under the auspices of the State Medical Association, and over the years, the Physicians Health Program has helped hundreds, if not thousands, of physicians to get the help that they need and to practice to promote the health of Mississippi. And they'll be having their annual retreat the last weekend in May this year for the participants. And other than that, I don't have anything new to report.
Well, and if I could just comment on that as well, our Physicians Health Program is nationally recognized as well as one of the best programs in the United States. And people or other states are envious of the state of Mississippi for the relationship that this board has with the Physicians Health Program.
Yes, yeah, I meant to say that the Physicians Health Program has an excellent working relationship with the Board of Medical Licensure, and we support them. They help us out a lot.
I think nationally, when we've seen places where the relationships between the Board of Medical Licensure, when they talk about places that are good places to practice medicine, a lot of times the presence of a physician's health program and also the way in which that program exists or works in concert with the board is really, those two things are key factors in contributing to an overall healthy working relationship as it pertains to safety and the optimal environment in which to practice medicine. And so I think it speaks again. I feel like we're tooting our horns today, but it is something to really be proud of. And I think sometimes we don't have the opportunity to really elevate, you know, the hardworking people, some of whom are sitting in the room that really work very hard to make sure that we are fostering a good environment to practice medicine while we're also kind of balancing that with protecting the public. And you don't have to choose one or the other. There can actually, those two things can actually coexist and really need to for it to be an optimal experience for the entire state. So thanks. And Dr. Lippincott, how exactly is the PHP funded? Can't people like the general public and other people, they can make donations? They
Yes.
take donations from generous people in the community. Is that
Yes,
not accurate?
Yes, indeed. They accept contributions, and you know, they're supported by the participants, and to some extent the medical board assists them also. And I just like to recognize Dr. Anthony Cloy, our director of the Physicians Health Program, and Kristen Powell, the associate director. Because they're always here.
Absolutely. We appreciate their support. Thank you, guys. All right. Telemedicine and interstate licensure compact, Dr. Givens, who is joining us by Zoom.
Yes, no report.
Okay. Licensees, education and communication. So Dr. McClendon is the chair. He is not with us today. Is there someone else? Okay, so no report for that. Physicians Assistant Advisory Task Force, Dr. Kennard.
No report.
All right. And Dr. Joyner, Rules and Regs.
As always, you have a report.
Of course.
Right, the first we have is for adoption. The definitions, they are in your packet, both the original language and the struck language. And the amendments, basically, the only thing that changed is item F, prescriptive authority, which means the legal authority of a professional license to practice medicine in the state of Mississippi to prescribe, administer, or dispense legend drugs. Licensees holding or possessing certain license types in training, such as medical doctors and doctors of osteopathic medicine, for example, are conferred prescriptive authority by virtue of their training and licensure of the board. That's the only change as far as definitions are concerned. Are there any questions? The second is part 2640, rule 1.6, bariatric medicine. We looked at the rules and regulations concerning bariatric medicine, and there have been changes that have occurred since this was originally adopted. When it was originally adopted, we were dealing with the prescription of very controlled substances that required DEA license and potential addiction and potential abuse at that time. We now have new medication, specifically semaglutide, which is very effective and is available to all practitioners. So, considering that these patients of ours, and we're always concerned with patients' safety and patients' access to quality medical care. This allows physicians across the state of Mississippi to prescribe non-addicting medications. And so therefore, we felt it in best interest of our patients and in patient safety and in the health of our citizens to strike the requirements to register as a bariatric medicine clinic. These changes were adopted in September. They were sent to the OLCR. Is that correct?
OLR.
The OLRC.
This is final adopt by the board before they go to the OLRC.
Okay. And as you see them, they need to be adopted. These have been discussed before, as I said. Any discussion?
So I think for the benefit of our, for the public members, the semaglutide medications are the medications that people have probably heard about. Ozempic, Mounjaro, are those types of medications. And I can hear Dr. McClendon in my head, even though he's not here, as a practicing internist on the coast, just talking about how transformational these medications have been for a large percentage of his patients. And I think a lot of our primary care colleagues who are on this board can speak to that as well. Because this is kind of a situation, I think, where we recognize that the practice of medicine and what's available has just kind of changed. When we are thinking about making sure that our rules and regs are kind of keeping up with the pace of medicine and making sure that we are not doing things that would make things too difficult for people to provide medications that are actually benefiting our state, which is we lead the nation in obesity, and also in diabetes and some of the other in cardiovascular disease, which are all things that have profiles that are improved and changed by these medications. And so I think being responsive to that was kind of at least the intent behind the rethinking and retooling of this.
Absolutely. And case in point to that is that if you look at the Mississippi Delta, you have Vicksburg, you have the Sullivan County. In the Delta, the vast majority of the Delta, there is one bariatric clinic. And Delta needs this service. And there are scores of physicians, nurse practitioners that will be able to prescribe this medication effectively for the treatment of those citizens. So it's eliminating a barrier to care, especially in the Delta. The other thing we need to point out is no other place in the United States of America is this required. So we want to eliminate any barriers to effective health care for the good of our members. It is a safe approach, and that should be part of our consideration and was.
Mr. Byers.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make it clear for the record is this must go before the OLRC for final approval. The board received a number, I believe, 8 written comments, which are in the materials that were provided to you about this rule change. And I would just like the record to reflect that the board has reviewed and is considering those comments and that they are part of the official record.
If you'll notice that those comments that were included, many of them came from, licensees and, practicing clinicians within the state that raised some, I think, very interesting and compelling questions, and they were very thoughtfully structured and put together to present for us. So for all of those individuals who did, I don't know if they ever wonder if we see these, but for those individuals who may be listening or who may look, know somebody who's here, please make sure your friends know that we did receive those comments and appreciate the time and effort that was taken to make sure that they were submitted to us so that their perspectives were considered.
Yes,
Thank you.
So you all have seen the proposed changes, and we accepted them in September. So it's time for us to vote on final adoption. Based on this, then, you know, the next step would be for it to be routed to LLRC. So is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and properly seconded for final adoption of these proposed changes to the rules and regs, specifically 2640, Rule 1.2 and 2640, Rule 1.6. Any further discussion on this matter before we vote?
yeah, I just think it's important to point out that like Dr. Joyner said, this is we're the only state that has such a requirement for registration of bariatric clinics, and that our current regulatory regulations will provide adequate avenues for enforcement of any any discrepancies or concerns about practicing weight loss medicine.
No, I think that's a great point, and it is, I think rewind 25, 30 years. I think the very thing that, makes us need this change is kind of rooted in the thing that made this necessary at one point, because there was a time when there were other medications that really had a very different side effect profile and had been implicated in as contributors, significant contributors to not only morbidity, but mortality. And because we had such a large number of obese patients, even at that time, it was about really the intent of protection in a different way. And to make sure that people were getting the necessary training in order to be able to prescribe those medications responsibly, so that patients who were getting that therapy were getting it by people who were adequately and appropriately trained to do so. So we don't forget the history.
And we have the tools now to monitor that we didn't have that.
Absolutely.
PMP is in effect. The investigators watch it carefully. If anything comes up, they will investigate it.
All right. So any other discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Joyner, to your committee for doing that hard work. Something else?
We have
Okay.
taken advantage of our ability to schedule our own meetings. Our subcommittee met in the middle of October to consider changes to the practice of acupuncture.
Got it.
Now, we commented before that a lot of these parameters are in statute, so we're not allowed to change things that are in statute. Anyway, if you look at the practice of acupuncture, you have two things in your packet. You have the old part 2625 and the new part 2625. Hopefully you've had a chance to read this. Basically, it describes the scope of practice, and if you'll notice, we're talking about the scope of practice between non-physician acupuncturists and physician acupuncturists. The scope of practice basically sets forth that patients that are needing acupuncture should be evaluated by a licensed physician. They can be treated by a licensed acupuncturist, but that individual is not allowed to make a diagnosis, meaning if a physician says you have pain going down your leg, I think acupuncture will help you with this probable disc problem. The acupuncture is free to agree with that and treat it. But they're prohibited from saying, no, I don't think that's what it is. It's something else. Only a licensed physician in the state of Mississippi can do that. The definitions are pretty straightforward as you see them there. They basically have to do with the regulatory body of the board of licensure and educational bodies as listed. Does anybody have any questions on any of these items?
So, I have a question.
Okay.
In looking at our group, and we are talking about practice of acupuncture, did we have, input or, collaboration with people who are actually engaged in the practice? And as we're talking about and creating these?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we meet with the acupuncturist committee at least once a year. And these changes were brought to us as a request from the acupuncturist committee.
Correct. Physician acupuncture licensure requirement that spells out the requirements that a physician has to go through to be licensed to practice acupuncture, including 200 hours of category 1 CME with at least 100 clinical hours and 100 didactic hours of training. Any questions concerning this? Board of Licensure must have on file copies of the CME before such licensure is issued. Then it goes over Rule 1.4, non-physician qualifications for licensure. These are stated before you in letters A, B, C, D through N. These basically have to do with licensure, the things that you and I both go through when we fill out our applications, the English language requirements, CPR certification and such. Does anybody have any question concerning those? These are the things that we will all have to do.
Can I ask a question?
So not quite yet, but I will put you on the list, okay?
Practice standards. An acupuncturist should obtain detailed medical history. They'll advise the patient of potential risks and benefits. They should use only sterilized single-use disposable needles and apply with all applicable state and municipal requirements. That's pretty straightforward. Patient records are basically the same standards that we hold all physicians and all Board of Medical Licensure licensees. That's pretty straightforward also. Anybody have any questions about that? Hearing none, informed consent. Informed consent is basically the same rules that all physicians have to go through to inform the patient of what the procedure is going to be, why the procedure is going to be, and how the procedure is going to be. Any questions? Hearing none, duty to notify board of a change of address. That's pretty straightforward. If you move, you got to let us know. You got to know where you are. Continuing education, we went over the education that you have to be certified. The acupuncturist must earn not less than 30 hours of acupuncture-related education every 2 years. He makes a list of the sources of CME, or I guess CAE, there. This is, you would require CME or a medical license.
Yeah, real quick. So do we have, these things that we're reviewing right now so far are not amended, correct?
No.
These are kind of the things that currently are in existence. Would it help?
Well, like I said, you have the original
Yeah.
right behind us.
Mhm.
And so basically, we're going through the changes. You can see what we've struck and what we've
Right.
added and changed.
That's what I was trying to figure out,
Okay.
if there were changes in every one of those places.
If I may, Madam President, you've got strike throughs.
Yeah.
And then the underlining is the new language.
Gotcha.
Starts on page 10 of 20.
I think it's probably better for me to flip that way, because I'm looking at the clean document is not helping me to figure out where the changes are. Okay. Got it.
In Dr. Jordan, it's just on page 15, it's going to 16 of it.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
15 of the strikeout. On page 5 of the original. Of the altered.
Got it.
Item B lays out all the CME rules. Like I said, they have to have 30 hours continuing education. It also spells out what to do if you get behind in your CME, how to make it up. And it also spells out the cycle. Under Rule 1.1 violations, it spells out what to do if any violations are determined. If CME is not obtained, you will be required to make up that CME. If you make up that CME during a period where you are also required to have 30 hours of continuing CME, you can't use that CME as you have to get that previous CME in addition to the additional 30 hours.
No double dip.
No double dip.
Pretty good rule for life. No double dipping.
Very much so. Renewal schedule, the board will notify every acupuncturist who is licensed of the upcoming requirements for renewal, just like they do us to renew our license. If you fail to renew your license within a 4-year period, you cannot renew it. You'll have to apply for a new license. Professional ethics is pretty straightforward. Same ethics that we hold ourselves to as far as our licensure through the board. Disciplinary proceedings is the same as the disciplinary proceedings that we now hold our physicians and other licensee to. Impaired acupuncturists, that again is pretty straightforward. It is the same standards that we apply to our physicians, osteopaths, and such. Use of professional titles, the acupuncturist or licensed acupuncturist can use, and it's spelled out right there, capital LIC, comma, AC, or L, comma, AC. Acupuncturists should not authorize, use false, misleading, or deceptive advertising. And in addition, they should not hold themselves out as a physician or surgeon or any combination of that. Use of the term board certified acupuncturist may use the term certified, provided the advertising also discloses the complete name of the board which conferred the relevant certification. Use of the term certified or any similar words or phrases to calculate or convey the same meaning if the advertised certificate has expired and has not been renewed at the time of the advertising in question, published or broadcast or otherwise promulgated. All right, acupuncturists should be mindful of appropriate boundaries for the sale of goods within their office. Just like physicians, they should not engage in exclusive distributorship or personal branding. You should make available disclosure information for the sale of any goods to inform the patients of their financial interests. And they can use durable medical goods essential to the patient's care as non-health related goods. Those are the changes as recommended by the Rules and Regulations Committee.
So just for clarification, in the way that we will proceed is I will open the floor for questions to Dr. Joyner right now from the board members first. And then upon conclusion of questions from the board, then I will allot 2 to 3 minutes. Ms. Stevens, I was gonna say Jerusha. Ms. Stevens, will have you have an opportunity to ask your question. Is that okay? So any questions from board members? Okay. Any questions from board members to Dr. Joyner related to these, the practice of acupuncture and 2625? With respect to the CME, is the CME kind of industry standard? Is that consistent like with other boards or other jurisdictions?
The CME, of course, is to be provided by those entities that we listed. So it would be through professional acupuncture.
And the number of hours, like just I'm just thinking about the number of hours, is that kind of standard? 30 is standard?
It's very consistent with our rules and regulations prior.
Okay,
So we're not really changing
Okay.
anything there.
got it. Any other questions or comments?
We need a minute. And at the top of page 13 on the test of English languages proficiency, there's some new scores that we need to change.
I figured that was going to come up.
I don't know if is that what you were going to ask about?
It's in that section, but not the scores.
Yeah,
The test, as so often happens, the scoring of the test has changed and we need to change with it. But we had looked it up and
Guys, the decision of the committee was to go with a proficiency standard on those test scores. Or just say proficient. The test, the bodies that give those tests, there's not just simply a proficient level. So Mr. Dalton and I went to each of the test providers and compared to determine what the appropriate numerical scores would be to qualify as proficient. And we're just double checking to make sure. I'm not positive that the numbers that are that are on the draft are the figures we came up with. And I apologize but we took a good bit of time to make sure that the scores were, that we looked up and compared, got the scores right, relatively correct. I'm just not sure if the corrected scores are in this draft. I want to make sure that they are.
So is that for all of them or is it just for TOEFL?
just for total.
All right, so that's
It's a numerical.
chapter 1.2, right?
we briefly had that
I'm sorry.
discussion.
Sorry.
It's item number 2, like
We-
2
under,
and 3.
okay,
We briefly had that discussion at the end of our meeting. And we basically wanted to proceed and looking up and getting more information and I'm thinking you're probably going to bring us more information.
Yes.
And Mr. Dalton is also looking to see, to confirm what numbers.
Yeah.
They don't look exactly like.
We'll just need to change them before y'all finally
Okay.
adopt, or before you pass.
that works.
Is it a national standard for each of these organizations? You said it's not just pass or fail, there's tiers. But could you just simplify it for future by saying according to that organization's, the approved organization's minimum standard or something along that lines? Without
Depends on, for some of the tests, there's like a functional level, and then there's a professional level, and then there's an advanced level. So there was not anything, again, the professional level, I think is what, in the ranges of numerical scores varied. And so that's, again, there was not simply one tier that we could determine that qualified as proficient. And so we took the score range, the current score range from each site, looked at how it was tiered and what numerical scores, made up the range for each tier. And then we also compared, for the different tests, what is an 800 on this test compared to what scores are part of this test, et cetera. But Mr. Dalton is trying to confirm that, and of course, further input. It just does, those don't look like the numbers that we had agreed.
I have a question. Do we not have basic minimum standards in other areas, like with PAs or with physicians or anything, or is it just specific here? Okay, because I was gonna say that seems like that might have been easy to figure out. Let's pull it. All right.
Can we ask that further comments?
Well, so I understand that we're in the process of working on figuring out items number 2 and 3. Outside of that, are there any additional questions from board members? And it may be that you might have some more in a second, but I just wanted to give you all an opportunity before opening up the floor. Dr. Lippincott.
I was just curious, do we have language requirements for our other licensees?
So, no,
I wonder
I think that was just,
how that came up.
The statute requires proficiency,
It's in the statute.
demonstrated proficiency in English.
It's in the Acupuncturist Practice Act.
They're required to have a certain proficiency in English.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that term is not defined by the statute. Which is why the test scores. Well, we were relying on the test scores, excuse me.
all right. So, hearing nothing further, Ms. Stevens. And since my timer is actually involved in research, I'll keep it.
Okay, thank you to the medical board for talking about this important subject. Rules and regulations needed to be updated. They hadn't been updated since we got some things changed in the statute. And so we've collaborated with the board for quite some time now. We've made a lot of good progress. I am in contact with the NCCAOM. That is our National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. So that is the benchmark exam that we take whenever we graduate. There are actually 4 examinations that we take. All of that to say that in letter I under Rule 1.4, non-finishing qualifications for licensure, under I, it states that the candidacy status are accredited by the NCCAOM. So this comment is to say that the NCCAOM does not accredit our education. They only do the certifying. And so this actually needs to be accredited by the ACAHM, not the NCCAOM.
Was that letter again?
H. Yeah.
CAAHM.
Is that different from the ACAOM?
Okay, so here's a sea change within our profession to remove the term Oriental and to then replace it with something better.
Is the
And
H
so-
holistic?
So we, as acupuncturists, are also herbalists. And so the Oriental medicine part is for herbal medicine, but it eliminates the pejorative term. Also, under I, just a recommendation from the NCCAOM. It says, let me start over. In candidacy status or accredited by ACAHM or its predecessor or successor agency that is at least 3 years in duration and includes the supervised clinical internship. And this is the comment. Any foreign applicant must complete the NCCAOM foreign education route for certification, as this ensures that applicants with an education outside the US are recognized. So that happens a lot in acupuncture. A lot of acupuncturists move to the United States and they have been trained outside. And that is another reason why we also have the foreign language requirement. That is the only comment that we had. The NCCAOM looked at these numbers for the TOEFL, and they did not have any changes to the numbers that I submitted to them just yesterday. And so I sent them what we got from Mr. Dalton, and they checked it out. And this is the only change that I'm just speaking to. And I know that there's a comment period, but it sounds like since we're wanting to ensure that our numbers for TOEFL are correct, maybe we could think about changing this, because it is an important thing to say that NCCAOM is not the accrediting for education, but they are the certification commission after you get your education. And I know there's lots of acronyms that are hard to keep up with. And one more thing to speak to your question about CMEs for acupuncture, we actually refer to them as CEUs. So, you know, there is one place where I noted that it was referred to as CME on part Rule 1.9 continuing education under B4. It says CME. I do think because we aren't required to get CME, in order to just clarify, we might want to change that to CEUs. And also one last thing, thank you board for your patience here. Going back up, one more thing. We do have to take 4 exams, and it was under Rule 1.4 non-physician qualifications. This is the last time I'm going to jump around. Letter K, number 1. We just wanted to change examination to examinations, because we have to take a biomedicine test. We have to take acupuncture point location, foundations of Chinese medicine, and then herbal medicine, 4 different tests. And Mississippi only requires the acupuncture or oriental medicine, but we'll take that up, trying to level up for the profession like that. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you for those points.
Now, before you sit down, you know,
He's already said
yeah,
too late. Sorry.
need to ask you to word again what that change under letter I is.
Give me a sec.
Dr. Joyner, we can get it off
You can get it?
off the
Okay.
recording if y'all
Okay.
just want to accept the changes as recommended.
And then we can put it together
Right.
more formally. That'd be
I
great.
was gonna say, if you want to,
You may sit down.
could she shoot an email to you summarizing what she
Like
recommends?
this whole meeting's recorded.
Yeah.
We can take it off the recording and get it the exact language that she suggested.
Okay.
All
It's
right.
just, yeah, a lot of references.
All right.
All right,
And that can-
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
Well, I tell you, this like collaborative medicine at its finest. I'm feeling it. I got all the feels. So at this point, I will entertain a motion. Don't everybody speak up at once.
Motion is to
To
approve the
approve,
changes,
the-
including those just discussed by
including the amendments is discussed.
yes, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting the proposed changes to the regulations with the corrections as mentioned or discussed? All say
Aye.
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 Opposed, you can only vote once, right? Opposed?
Vote
Yes.
and vote on.
All right, thank you guys so much. Thanks for being here.
I want to thank you for your comments. I want to thank the members of our committee. They work really hard and they do a really good job. And I want to thank you for the ability to schedule our meetings when we need to.
Yeah, I'm all for self-scheduling. I love it. All right. So that takes us to, the next item on our agenda, which is item 10, which is, approval of consent order for Dr. Rahal.
And Dr. Hall, primary, set of practices in Tennessee. Dr. Hall got in trouble in Tennessee because he was using blank signed prescription form. Behind the proposed consent order, in your materials, should have a copy of the consent order from Tennessee, which describes in more detail the, exact number and nature of violations. For about 5 years, according to order, Dr. Rahal, for a period of approximately 58 months, routinely pre-signed as many as 100 paper prescriptions that were otherwise left blank and were distributed to staff in his group. However, according to the order, there was no evidence that any of the pre-signed prescriptions were actually misused. The Tennessee board put Dr. Rahal on probation and fined him. I am not sure that if this had happened in Mississippi, that this board would have reached that exact conclusion. However, the consent order that we offered mirrors the Tennessee order, places his Mississippi license on probation, and requires him to fully comply with all requirements of the Tennessee order, which included a $5,800 administrative fine. So that's the basis on which we present this consent order, which has been signed and agreed to by Dr. Rahal, and asked the board to consider it.
Is there, a motion for approval of the consent order?
Probation. For how long? 58 months.
No, that was the period of time in which he was treated.
That he committed the
Right.
act. How long is
And
the probation?
he must come before the Tennessee board, and he would have to come before this board, asking to have the probation lifted. So there is no specific time frame. It's a minimum, the Tennessee order, excuse me, I don't want to tell you.
1 year?
Mhm.
Okay.
After 1 year probation in Tennessee, he becomes eligible to petition that board for an order of compliance with the probation. And so at the same time, once he gets it lifted in Tennessee, he'll be eligible to come and request the probation.
At that point, we have opportunity to ask about any other issues in that time period or before with his license.
Yes, sir.
So if he's on probation though, then the whole point is that his license would be in jeopardy if there are any other additional
Right.
infractions. So I think that information would already be reportable. And the only way that it would be lifted is if Tennessee had lifted it. So if there's something that happens in the interim with his license, Tennessee would probably know and take action, and we would be aware of that. And he wouldn't be eligible to come back to have it lifted by us if he was still in trouble. with
Right.
Tennessee.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the consent order, for reciprocation of the Tennessee consent order.
There a second?
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Anybody abstaining? All right, that consent order is approved. Next, looking to see, we're gonna, do we wanna do the approval of the consent, the other consent order now, since we're here, and I know you might not be ready for that call, it's a little out of order, but before we start having personal appearances and other things, or are we gonna keep going? You want to just keep going? Well, if Dr. Wooten's already here, we can go ahead. Okay,
Well,
that's
I
fine.
did-
We'll stick with it.
I apologize, Dr. Wooten is here in person, and has been here since 8.
Oh, well, no, then let's keep, we're gonna keep going in order. All right, then. So next we'll move to agenda item 11, which is the appearance of Dr. Wooten. Thanks, David. Because
Good morning, I'm James Sweden. I come before you today to ask for, when I was here in March and you granted my license, there, said I had to come see you if I wanted to change which states I wanted to practice in. I come before you today to ask for considerations. Yes, ma'am.
just a little closer to the mic, please.
Yes,
You have
ma'am.
such a soft voice.
I ask for your consideration to practice in the states in Louisiana and Kansas. I've worked very hard to try to find a job since March. There have been 4 positions in Mississippi that have been considered for, but not been hired in. There is a location in Louisiana that I have a contract with, provided I can get a license. There's a place in Kansas that would love to hire me. I was not hired. I did not take a position in Colorado because shortly after that meeting in March, the CEO at that hospital was fired and they placed a hiring freeze on all of their positions. And the Alabama board turned me down. So that's why I come to you today to ask for your consideration for new states.
So, as you'll notice in, behind tab 11 is, are the documents that, refer to this issue. Anybody have any questions at this time? Now, Dr. Wooten, in the documents that you provided or at least sent, so you kind of gave a very general overview, but to my recollection, you were willing to, if you might have that opportunity to continue with those same restrictions, correct?
All of the previous restrictions and issues, conditions with this board would continue forward. I'm not asking to change any of those.
Dr. Wooten, good morning. I saw in the last consent that you had agreed to have a workplace monitor for the job in Colorado. Have you identified such a person? I think it's the job in Kansas that you seem to be most enthusiastic about. Have you identified a person there that could possibly be a workplace monitor for you?
There would be, I can't give you a specific name at this time.
Have you been in discussions about the need for that?
Yes.
Any other questions from board members?
I believe that the consent order calls for a relationship with the physician's health program. And that would be necessary in Kansas and Louisiana also. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir. And I have no problems with that.
Have you had any contact with the Louisiana or Kansas PHP yet?
I am still in the process of, working with their boards to get a license in the first place,
Right.
dependent on y'all's meeting. But yes, I would, you know, if they grant that, I will immediately contact their PHPs. In fact, it's the head of the PHP who's helping move my license through the process in Kansas, so that's already been, that's already being discussed.
Any other questions for Dr. Wu? If there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion. Which can either be to close the meeting, to consider to go into executive session, or otherwise.
I make a motion, we approve this request.
So it's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? In that case, the request is granted.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate
You are very welcome. Thank you for coming today and good luck to you.
it. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda is item 12, hearing in the case of Dr. Holtauer.
Yes, ma'am. This matter's been continued several times. This is an agreed motion for continuous. We're close to resolving this matter, and based on circumstances I would rather not put into the public record, we agreed to continue this matter to until the January meeting, and therefore I would request that the board approve the continuance for Dr. Holtauer. If the board would like to go into executive session, I'd be happy to, answer any questions you have about that.
So I, at this point, would be willing to entertain a motion either for approval of the continuance or otherwise, whatever the board's pleasure. For continuance, okay, move to for continuance. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Granting the.
Aye.
And any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So continuance is granted. And next, which I tried to jump to earlier, item 13, approval of consent order for Dr. Charles Schlosser.
Dr. Schlosser. 13,
Schlosser.
number 13. Oh, sorry. It's number 13.
From the
Brief synopsis, this is for approval of consent order. The board does not, I believe, have, because the consent order may have been put on your computer's late. We just finalized it, got all the changes done this morning. Just a summary, Dr. Schlosser came with this board in January with an initial consent order, request for consent order. At that time, the board agreed to the consent order. The primary, based on action, it was started as action in Louisiana. Mississippi, we were essentially reciprocating. The primary additional requirement on Dr. Schlosser in the Mississippi consent order last January was to complete the pro course offered by CPAP. Dr. Schlosser, as I understand it, we'll put Dr. Schlosser on so he can answer any questions. first of all, I forgot to introduce Dr. Slosser and his attorney, Mr. Tristan Armour. I apologize, both. But Dr. Schlosser, as I understand it, did everything he was required to do, except he did not turn into the final assignment for the pro course on time. He did not pass the course because of that. A new affidavit was issued and served on Dr. Schlosser for not complying with the terms of this board's original January consent order. The primary term is that he repeat the probe course, that he not be allowed to reuse any of his work from the first go round, and that he do it in a timely fashion. Specifically, Dr. Schlosser would be required to register for the probe, re-register for the probe course anew within 30 days, and then he submit successful completion, proof of successful completion within 6 months. And board like at this time, I would have Dr. Schlosser sworn, and so he can answer any questions the board might have. I'd be happy to answer any questions. His attorney have any comments?
I could summate maybe. Yeah, Tristan Armour, I represent Charles. I represented him here in January. I can't believe we're here, to be honest with you. He'll tell you, he had his essay done, drafted. He was off by a day. They told him early when the due date was. They called him. When he went to do it, he could not print. Said he'd send it the next day. He had computer issues. We had the IT guy verify that. And it took him an extra 5 or 6 days to turn in his final essay. That's fact. Didn't do it on time. I can't believe we're here on it. I think this was the first words out of my mouth to him. You got to be blank. He sat through every class. He participated fully. Probe confirmed that with me. Okay. Probe said, have him take the class again. That's their recommendation. And as I was driving up here today trying to figure out what I was going to say, other than the fact that no, we didn't turn the test in correctly. I thought about my dad. He's kind of my hero. Always has been. He was a CEO, ran a large company. And on more than one occasion, I would come from school and the power was out, right? Not because he couldn't pay it, because he didn't get around to doing it. My mom would chew his butt up and down. And I remember just trying to wonder why he didn't stay on top of paying the power. He's a busy guy. He's responsible for 850 employees. He'd get a little overwhelmed. He'd set his daily priority list and things have got to get done. He was a good dad, good father, good husband. So he had all those responsibilities. And you know what? He just screwed up. Just like Dr. Schlosser. Doesn't make him any less my hero. He was the captain of a big ship. He's a good man and a good guy. We're not here today on Dr. Schlosser's inability to treat his patients. There's no complaint about that. He's a good doctor. He can diagnose, treat with the best of them. What he is not good at, apparently, deadlines, paperwork, things of that nature. That's why he's here in the first place. So all I would ask, yeah, he's got to be rehabbed and he's got to be punished. That's y'all's role. Just be reasonable about it. Let him retake that course. Let him prove that he can follow some deadlines, adjust his priorities, and answer appropriately the consent order he received. And with that, any questions you have for Dr. Schlosser?
If you want to stand or sit, that's fine, but we just ask that you be sworn in with the court.
You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Does the board have any questions at this time?
Dr. Schlosser, is there anything that, you had a pretty eloquent, prelude. So if there's anything in particular that you specifically wanted to say, that's fine. And then I don't know if the board members have any other specific questions, but I did not, since you came all this way and you've given of your time, I didn't want you to feel as if you didn't have an opportunity to let your voice be memorialized, at least, with our board members.
Like Tristan said, I failed to print the report on time. There were 2 assignments that were completed as part that needed to be printed. At the end of the course, after 3 days, the guy, casually said, hey, if you haven't turned the hard copies in of everything we presented, make sure you turn it in with your final essay. When he said 2 weeks, they called me Thursday, which was the first day of the course at 12 o'clock and said, we haven't received it. I was like, man, I thought it was due later. I was actually at the Junior Olympics with my 12-year-old son. He had been competing for 3 days and he qualified for the Junior Olympics. So I went home, said I'll print it, got home, couldn't log in remotely. I told him I'll have it tomorrow because I was on call at the rehab hospital. So when I drove to the hospital, I live in New Orleans. I drove to Mississippi, the server was down, I still could not get it. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday comes, we had tornadoes, the whole server was down in Gulfport, and then I printed it and turned it in, and I received a non-passing score.
Dr. Sasha,
Yes,
so you've identified that mundane tasks are a problem. And your lawyer so eloquently presented that as well. Have you thought about what you can do to help you with that? Have you thought about what would you do differently now so that you don't miss another
So
deadline?
I would have printed it the day that, right after the course, the speaker, proctored the course, but don't turn anything in now. I want y'all take a day or 2 to read over it and then, turn it in 2 weeks. So I had no idea that, I was gonna have a printer issue. And so I wait 2 weeks, it's time to turn it in and then I can't access it.
I understand this specific incident, but you will be required to do mundane things like sign records in a timely fashion and to complete any procedure notes that you have, any other important documentation. Have you considered any type of virtual assistant or a calendar even that reminds you of tasks?
So for the, clinical records, procedure notes, we do them, right away. For the clinical records, we do have a DAX system that's been started, a virtual scribe. So, in terms of medical records, they can be done in a timely fashion. So, like I said, this is a situation I've never failed anything in, at this point. The concern was, I tried to call them after the fact. That's why the letter states it was June, I think it says June 29th, I failed, and they said that actually wasn't sent out for about a month or so after that, because I sent emails and letters asking them, hey, here's the situation, this is what happened, because part of that course is it's past class, conditional pass, meaning you didn't meet some of the expectations, and then there's a failure. And I petitioned to ask, hey, I've done everything, I participated in this course, is there any way, understanding these circumstances, that I would get a conditional pass? And they didn't budge on that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Is there a motion?
Before we do that, Paul, did you have anything further that you wanted to add?
Nothing further with the board addressing your points out.
So the consent order is to allow him to repeat the course.
Yes, sir. And he agrees to pay the additional, here are copies of it. I apologize. To pay the additional costs primarily related to our compliance officer has been having to deal with this for some time.
Repeat the course within 6 months.
Completed within 6
Need
months.
to repetition, or does it go to Ken?
Practice.
He practices primarily in Louisiana.
Go for it.
Oh, go, yes. Yes, excuse me.
And I might add, he's already registered for the course in anticipation of being here today. We got on that right away.
We talk hypotheticals. Should it be
No.
approved if he meets the demands?
If we're gonna do that, we should probably do it in a different venue.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
It's not, there's not one. So. You all have received a copy hot off the press of the consent order. Which I think was pretty well outlined before. So I will entertain whatever motion is the board's desire.
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent order.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstention? All right, the consent order is approved. Thank you.
Same.
All right. So, yeah.
Madam President, could I ask, Francis question? Did you add a subpoena to the? I'm
Yeah,
not talking to Francis, I'm sorry, Dr. Curtis. Did,
she did.
add- What I wanted to mention was, we have an item about prospective litigation that the board will need to address in executive session. And I assume, I suppose now we have two investigative subpoenas to
Mhm.
consider, so I wanted to, ask, it's up to you, Matt, if you want to do one executive session. Official on the minutes, 3 motions go into executive session and reasons, but then you could leave the room and do everything in one.
I think that would probably be preferred. And then, so we'll entertain motions to close the meeting for consideration of these 3 different items.
The first 2 items, and I don't have the numbers for them in front of me.
2024-29 and 2024-40.
I would request that the board go into executive session to consider issuing investigative subpoenas in those 2 cases. As far as the prospective litigation, I would ask the board consider going into executive session so I can advise the board concerning prospective litigation, because an open discussion might negatively impact the board's position.
So can I get a motion to close the meeting to consider whether to enter into executive session on these items that are before us, which are the investigative subpoenas and a discussion regarding potential litigation?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Madam President, I would request that Paul Barnes and Mike Lucius join us in executive session.
Okay.
session, and Dr. Joyner will inform you of the decisions of executive session.
Okay, thank you. We met in executive session to discuss, first of all, 2 subpoenas which were approved. Second of all, we met to discuss potential litigation, which was discussed.
We were duly informed.
I just want to say, Madam President, that the next agenda item is a disciplinary hearing in the matter of Dr. Stephen Sutter. That is scheduled for tomorrow to begin at 8 a.m. We had to set that for a date certain to accommodate Dr. Sutter's out-of-state expert witnesses in their schedules.
All right. Well, hearing that, then I guess we should recess until tomorrow morning. All right. We don't have to motion for that. We're officially recessed until the morning. And you can eat lunch if you like.